While I was abroad, my sister moved into my $600,000 house and announced at a family barbecue, "It's ours now. You'll thank me later." My parents nodded and said, "She deserves it more than you." I just smiled and replied, "Interesting." The next morning, I sent an email to the HOA and my lawyer. 3 days later, the locks changed, the utilities froze, and when my sister tried to host a party, what she discovered on the front door left her screaming. I, 34M, stepped off the plane at LAX after 14 months in Singapore, exhausted but satisfied. The consulting contract had been brutal, but the money was incredible, and I'd managed to save most of it. My house in Orange County, the one I'd worked 70-hour weeks for 3 years to buy, was waiting. Or so I thought. My parents had insisted on throwing a welcome-back barbecue the day after I landed. I should have known something was off when my sister answered my mother's phone and said the party would be at my place. I'd left her with an emergency key before leaving, strictly for maintenance issues. The property management company I'd hired was supposed to handle everything else. When I pulled up to my house that Saturday afternoon, cars lined the street. My sister's SUV sat in my driveway like it owned the place. I walked through my front door to find furniture rearranged, different curtains on the windows, and family photos I didn't recognize on the walls. My stomach dropped. My sister spotted me first and rushed over with this bright, entitled smile plastered across her face. She announced that she'd moved in 6 months ago and made the place so much better. She gestured around like she was showing off her own renovation project. My parents stood nearby, nodding along with everything she said. She told me I'd thank her later for taking such good care of things while I was gone. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. I asked what she meant by moved in, and she explained it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. She'd left her husband after finding out about his affair, needed a place to stay, and my house was just sitting empty. Waste of space, she called it. She'd even brought her 2 kids, who were currently jumping on what used to be my leather couch. My father chimed in then, saying she deserved it more than I did. He reminded me I'd been halfway around the world making plenty of money while she was struggling as a single mother. My mother added that family helps family, and I should be grateful my sister had kept the place lived in so it didn't fall apart. I stood there processing the absolute insanity of what I was hearing. My sister had stolen my house, my parents had endorsed it, and they expected me to just accept this as some kind of favor. She went on about how she'd enrolled her kids in the local schools, made friends with the neighbors, and really settled into the community. She said it would be cruel to uproot them now. I looked at my sister, then at my parents, and just smiled. I told them that was interesting and asked if we could talk about this later. My sister looked relieved, probably thinking I was going to roll over. My father clapped me on the shoulder and said he knew I'd understand. I grabbed a beer from my own fridge and walked out to the backyard, my mind already working through what needed to happen next. The barbecue continued around me like nothing was wrong. Relatives asked about Singapore, and I gave them the highlights while watching my sister hold court in my kitchen. She'd invited her friends too, apparently. They were drinking my wine and complimenting her on her beautiful home. Every word felt like nails on a chalkboard. I left early, claiming jet lag. I drove to a hotel and spent the night staring at the ceiling, fury building in my chest. But I didn't act on emotion. I'd learned patience in business, and this situation required surgical precision. The next morning, I sent an email to my real estate lawyer. I'd kept her on retainer for investment properties, and she knew exactly what I needed. I explained the situation in clinical detail and asked what my options were. Her response came within an hour. Since my sister had no lease, no rental agreement, and no legal right to occupy the property, she was a squatter. I could pursue eviction, but there was a faster way. I also contacted the HOA. I'd paid my dues in advance before leaving for Singapore, but I told them there was an unauthorized occupant in my home and that I was resuming residence immediately. They were very helpful, especially when I mentioned the violations I'd noticed. Unpermitted modifications to the front landscaping, a trampoline in the backyard against community rules, and cars consistently blocking the sidewalk. Then I called my property management company. They claimed they'd sent monthly reports to my email, but I'd been so buried in work that I'd filtered them to a folder I rarely checked. When I opened it, I found months of warnings. My sister had fired them 2 weeks after I left, claiming she was now the primary resident and had my permission. They tried to contact me, but she'd apparently convinced them I'd authorized everything. I contacted a locksmith who specialized in same-day service and scheduled them for Wednesday morning. I called the utility companies and informed them that unauthorized users had accessed my accounts and that I needed to verify all future changes in person with ID. They flagged the accounts immediately. My lawyer drafted a formal trespass notice. Since my sister had no legal tenancy agreement, she wasn't entitled to the standard eviction protections. The notice gave her 72 hours to vacate or face criminal charges. On Tuesday evening, I called my sister. I told her I'd thought about what she said and wanted to discuss things further. She sounded thrilled, probably expecting me to hand over the deed. I asked if she was planning anything for the weekend, and she mentioned she was hosting a birthday party for her oldest on Saturday. All the kids from school were coming, she said. She'd already sent out invitations with my address on them. I told her that sounded wonderful and ended the call. Wednesday morning at 9, the locksmith arrived. I met him there with my lawyer and a police officer I'd requested for standby. My sister's car wasn't in the driveway. According to my neighbor, who I'd spoken with the night before, she dropped her kids at school every morning around 8 and usually ran errands until 11. The locksmith changed every lock on the property. Front door, back door, garage, side gate. I had the garage door opener codes reset. The whole process took 90 minutes. While he worked, I walked through my house documenting everything. My bedroom had been converted into her master suite. My home office was now a playroom. My carefully curated furniture was either gone or buried under her clutter. I took photos of everything. My lawyer filmed a video walkthrough for evidence. When we finished, I had the officer serve the trespass notice by taping it to the front door, as my sister wasn't present to receive it personally. Then I contacted the utility companies and had everything switched off except for basic power to prevent pipe damage. My sister called me at noon, absolutely hysterical. She was screaming about being locked out of her home, asking what I thought I was doing. I calmly explained that she was locked out of my home, which she'd been illegally occupying. I told her the trespass notice gave her 72 hours to arrange for her belongings to be removed, and after that, anything remaining would be considered abandoned property. She threatened to call the police, and I encouraged her to do so. I was standing in my kitchen with my lawyer and had every document proving ownership. She threatened to call our parents, and I told her to go ahead. Within 20 minutes, my phone exploded, with calls from my mother and father. I ignored them all. My lawyer had advised me that engaging would only create problems. Instead, I sent a single text to the family group chat explaining that my sister had unlawfully occupied my property, refused to leave, and was now facing legal consequences. I attached a photo of the property deed with my name on it. My mother called me heartless. My father said I was destroying the family over a stupid house. My sister posted on social media about how her cruel brother had made her and her children homeless. The notifications were constant, but I muted everything and focused on what needed to happen next. Thursday morning, my sister showed up with a U-Haul and 3 of her friends. I'd anticipated this and had arranged for a moving company to be on standby. I met her at the door and told her she had access for 4 hours to remove her belongings, supervised by the movers to ensure nothing of mine left the property. She looked like she wanted to kill me, but didn't have much choice. The movers inventoried everything that went into the truck. My sister tried to take my television, claiming she'd bought it, but I pulled up the receipt from 2 years earlier. She tried to take cookware I'd registered for at my own housewarming. Every item became a battle, but I had documentation for everything that mattered. By Thursday evening, her stuff was out. The house looked like a disaster zone, but it was empty of her presence. I hired cleaners for Friday and had them do a deep clean of the entire property. I also had the locks changed again, just to be safe, and installed a security camera system that fed directly to my phone. Saturday arrived, the day of the birthday party my sister had planned. I debated whether to do anything extra, but my lawyer advised me to let natural consequences play out. I went to my house that morning and waited. Around 1 in the afternoon, cars started arriving. Parents with kids, all dressed for a party. They walked up to the front door and found a large sign I'd printed and laminated. It read, "Private property. No party scheduled at this address. The former occupant was removed for trespassing. Please contact her directly for the new location." I watched from my living room window as confusion spread through the crowd. Kids started crying. Parents pulled out their phones. My sister's car pulled up 20 minutes later, and she leapt out already screaming. When she saw the sign, Her face went completely white, then bright red. She started pounding on my door, but I didn't answer. She screamed that I'd ruined her daughter's birthday, that I was a monster, that she'd make me pay for this. The parents gathered their confused children and left quickly, several shooting my sister disgusted looks. One mother stopped to argue with her about wasting their time. My sister stood on the front lawn sobbing while calling our parents. They showed up 30 minutes later, and my father tried to force his way past me when I opened the door. I told him calmly that if he didn't leave immediately, I'd call the police for trespassing. My mother begged me to reconsider, to think about the children. I asked her why she hadn't thought about my rights when she told my sister she deserved my house. I asked my father why family helping family only applied when it benefited my sister. Neither of them had an answer. They left, my mother crying and my father throwing threats over his shoulder about how I'd regret this. The following week was a nightmare of family drama. Relatives took sides. Most of them sided with my sister because she had kids and looked like the victim. A few cousins reached out privately to say they understood that my sister had always been entitled, but they couldn't say so publicly without causing problems. I didn't care. I contacted my insurance company about the unauthorized occupancy and filed a claim for damages. I sent my sister an itemized bill for the 6 months of utilities, property taxes, and HOA fees she'd benefited from, plus damages for the modifications she'd made without permission. The total came to just over $18,000. She laughed when she received it and posted it online, mocking me for nickel-and-diming a struggling single mother. But my lawyer sent a formal demand letter, and when she didn't respond, we filed in small claims court. Update 1. The court date arrived 6 weeks later. My sister showed up with our parents and no lawyer, apparently thinking the judge would side with her based on sympathy. I arrived with my attorney, a binder full of documentation, and a timeline of every lie she'd told. The judge listened to her sob story about being a victim of domestic abuse who needed shelter, about her brother abandoning his house while she suffered. Then my lawyer presented the evidence. The property deed. The emails showing I'd hired property management. The termination notice my sister had sent them, forged with my electronic signature. The utility bills she'd racked up. The HOA violations. The documented damage to my property. The judge's expression changed from sympathetic to disgusted. She ruled in my favor for the full amount plus court costs and legal fees, bringing the total to nearly $24,000. My sister was ordered to pay within 90 days or face wage garnishment. Outside the courthouse, my father tried one last time to guilt me. He said I'd won and asked if I was happy now. I looked him in the eye and told him I'd bought that house with money I'd earned working 100-hour weeks, that I'd sacrificed relationships and health to build something of my own, and that his daughter had stolen it while he cheered her on. I said if that made me the villain in his story, I could live with it. My mother tried a different approach, saying we could still fix this as a family. I asked her what she'd done to fix it when my sister moved in without permission. She didn't have an answer. I walked away and haven't spoken to any of them since. Update 2. 3 months after the court judgment, my sister still hadn't paid a cent. My lawyer initiated wage garnishment procedures, which was when I discovered she'd quit her job 2 weeks after the ruling. She was apparently living with our parents and working under the table to avoid the judgment. My lawyer advised that we could pursue other collection methods, but it would cost more in legal fees than we'd likely recover. I made a different choice. I filed a report with the credit bureaus, ensuring the judgment appeared on her credit report. It would stay there for 7 years, making it nearly impossible for her to rent an apartment, get a car loan, or buy property. I also sent copies of all documentation to her ex-husband's lawyer. Turns out she'd been claiming in her divorce proceedings that she had stable housing and income. The evidence that she'd been illegally squatting and was now dodging a court judgment significantly damaged her credibility. Her ex-husband's attorney used it to negotiate a more favorable custody arrangement. Was it petty? Probably. But she tried to steal my house and expected me to thank her for it. The house itself took months to restore to how I wanted it. I had to repaint several rooms, replace the damaged flooring in the playroom, and redo the landscaping she'd destroyed. The HOA fines for her violations came to almost $3,000, which I paid and added to the debt she owed me. I eventually rented the property to a lovely couple with excellent references and moved into a condo closer to my new job. The rental income covers the mortgage and then some, building equity while someone else maintains the place. My parents still reach out occasionally, usually around holidays, asking if I'm ready to reconcile. I've made it clear that reconciliation requires acknowledgement of what happened and a genuine apology, neither of which they're willing to provide. They still insist my sister was just trying to survive and that I overreacted. Some of my relatives have quietly reconnected, admitting they were wrong to judge without knowing the full story. One of my cousins told me she'd heard my sister had tried the same thing with our grandmother's house before I returned, but our grandmother had refused to give her a key. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled it. Could I have been more generous? Sure. I could have given her 30 days or helped her find another place. But that would have rewarded the theft and taught her that she could take whatever she wanted without consequences. Instead, she learned a harder lesson. My parents learned that enabling entitled behavior has costs. And I learned that sometimes family doesn't mean what I thought it did. I'm doing fine now. Better than fine, actually. My career is thriving. I'm dating someone who thinks the whole situation is insane and respects how I handled it. And I sleep well at night knowing I stood up for myself. My sister, from what I hear through the family grapevine, is still living with our parents and working dead-end jobs to avoid garnishment. Her kids are in therapy dealing with the instability. Part of me feels bad for them, but they're not my responsibility, and their mother's choices aren't my burden to bear. The house is still mine. The locks have been changed, and I'll never give anyone an emergency key again.